they put us out there. They called it on the line. It was still within that 3.5 miles, but there were a lot of gullies in the jungles heading back up, and they had a company in each one of them. And I know they said we're going to take you off the line, give you 3 days rest back at the airport. So they came and picked us up in trucks and took us back to the airport. That night, one of the Japanese cruisers got through, and he pattern shelled the airport. You'd hear that boom, 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 move over, and boom, boom, boom back until one of his booms hit where our company was resting. We lost 23 men in one boom. And so the next morning, the captain said, "Your 3 days rest is over. We're going back out front."
So I take it you and the men you were with were setting up a perimeter to help protect the airport.
Yeah, we had to hold that 3.5 thing perimeter. One time, they asked me to go scout the perimeter. They let me pick 2 men. We could take our helmet and our canteen and our rifle and a bandolier of ammunition. And then we got to get on the Japanese side of the line. And we weren't supposed to let anybody know, not let any of the Japs know we were out there. Said no fighting, except to protect yourself if you had to.
Mm-hmm.
So I got about 3/4 of the way around there. I figured that's enough in necking your own lines. We took our helmets off. There was 3 of us, and then you took a chance of all the booby traps and barbed wire and stuff that they would have out in front of them. But we got back all right. I didn't have to patrol anymore.
So that just had to be so dark and so scary.
Yeah, we just had to make sure that they weren't built up out. Some
Right.
troops were building up, so we moved pretty slow, and we listened for sound pretty much. And, it was pretty open. We had an awful canopy over the top. The top blocked it in, but it was pretty open trail around there. Wasn't much jungle to follow. That we only made. They had our company probe one place up at the end of one of these gullies. Said there were new Japs, so we went up there by night and got up there in the daytime, or just in daylight, and you could hear them guys shooting all over the places. That valley must have been 1.5 miles long, and these guys just figured they heard some Marines sneaking up on them. They were shooting out there in the dark. And we still had a native guide was leading us in there. They had an outpost on the left up about, for some reason there was the earth went up there about 20 feet. And before we almost got there to where we were going to go down into that valley, that native we had fell down and rolled about 10 feet down a hill, and that screwed up the whole thing, because we were no longer going to surprise them. So they hollered for me to come up with a BA. I had a BAR at that time. And then the lieutenant said, "It's too late. We know what's down there. That's what we came for." So he hurried up and got us out of there. But the Japs still killed one guy and shot one guy in the wrist. And you seen him, he just had a tiny little piece of meat holding his hand on. But then about 2 weeks later, they sent a whole battalion of men in there. They didn't last very long. They were coming back running. So I don't know. I think they finally sent a couple of regiments in there. We got up on a hill. They were dropping. That was Then we got the word that the First Division was pulling out off of the island, and they said that Point Loma was next to the airport. They'd never been able to clean the Japanese off of them, so they took our company way up in the hills, made a big circle, and came back down to the ocean. We had the Japanese army on behind us, and had them Japs that were on Point Loma in front of us. And they said the next morning, the 5th Marines, at their last day on the island, they're going to make a bayonet charge across that point. And sure enough, about daylight, you could hear all the screaming and hollering and shooting and making all the noise they could. They tore into that point. I don't know how many Japs they killed, but they pushed a lot of them right at us. We had a guy named Piccoli got bayoneted, and a guy named Brian got bayoneted. Brian eventually lost his foot. And Piccoli, I was always in contact with him after the war. But I don't know if he lost 2 legs and an arm, or if he just lost 1 leg and an arm. But they didn't have helicopters there yet. And 4 men were taking him back, and a mortar shell landed close to him and messed him up. That was just about the end of Guadalcanal. Yeah, after Tarawa, we went to Hawaii. You're correct about that. And we had 3 liberties in Hilo. And then for some reason they took our company, but they said, everybody take all your gear, everything you got. We're going on about a 5-mile hike. And what it was is we went to some big farm out there. And they marched us down to the beach, and that was the prettiest little cove you ever wanted to see in the South Pacific. They said, fix your tents. You're going to be here a while. And we had just those ponchos and a couple of blankets with our gear. So that meant they kept fixing meals for us there. And everything we ate had sand in it. But we had full, you could do anything you want to all day long. You could go swimming, you could do anything. And then finally they showed up with a bunch of rubber boats. And so every night, as soon as it got dark, we'd put 12 men to a rubber boat. We had 12 rubber boats. And what we had there was, they had farmed into 2 companies and 120 men each.
They were preparing you for what skirmish this time?
Saipan.
Taipan.
We were supposed to go in there the night before the invasion and take over. We had targets.
This was the big banzai attack, right?
Oh yeah, eventually. All the way out to Saipan, these planes kept coming over and dropping a canister with a parachute, a little parachute, and the destroyer would stop and go over and get it. And that turned out to be aerial photographs of where we were supposed to land. And the Japs kept that under smoke. That we never did. They finally called it off. Didn't call our landing off, and it was they had that thing barbed wired and sand trapped. And
smoke all over.
They kept it covered, so they just had to do away with. Couldn't take a chance of landing us. But I was good, boy. Once you get in the surf, on them rubber boats, there ain't no way back. You're going all the way. So.
How long were you there in the Battle of Saipan?
Oh, a month. Yeah, the 6 Marines landed. I seen some of their alligators turning over. that their nose would hit the reef and that whole thing would turn over. So they just dump everybody out. But we got ashore, but that first night, we never got much more than from here to the street away from the... In fact, the 10th Artillery was right there with their 75s right on the same line we were.
Did we lose a lot of Marines on Taipan?
No, we lost 800, but we killed 40,000 Japanese. That night, we were right at the bottom of a big hill, and 29 Jap tanks came down that hill that night, and there were a lot of soldiers riding on them, and the guys just got up with their bazookas and went out there and knocked off all of those tanks. And next morning we went on, made our way on up the top of the hill. We didn't go down the beach. We were on the side of the hills going down, and there was another outfit on the other side of the mountains trying to keep that side cleaned up. That first day we got on a hill there right above Gaudalcanal town, and then it was like a bluff that dropped about 200 feet, and we could see the town below us. We could see the Marines to the left below us. So they called in a guy came in from an aircraft carrier to help direct the planes to drop the bombs. And the lieutenant told me, and another guy, there was like a telephone booth there, but when you opened the door, it was straight down steps. So two of us went down there. The lieutenant gave us a flashlight. When we were down there, man, the earth shook, bombs, and that guy from the Air Force had called that bombing raid right in on top of himself. He killed about 8 Marines and himself.
Oh my.
All we found down that hole was a fifth of whiskey. Whoever was down there had a pint. He had a pint of 4 roses. I never will forget that he had 4 roses.
They still make that today. 4 roses.
So we had 18 Japs come up that night out of holes that were dug in that around us that we didn't even know about. Mm-hmm. And we could see down there, see Gaudalcanal town. Finally, we seen a group of Marines filtering up that street, they were gone about 20 minutes. They all came back riding bicycles. They find the bicycle shop.
And they took them.
So we were there another day, and the next morning you could hear that music playing. And everybody got real curious on that, and here they come. They were marching 6 deep, playing that music, and all of a sudden they broke, and here comes that big banzai charge. It was 860 of them,
Oh
biggest
God.
one of the war, and it was so stupid because we had the road covered. We had fire from on top. We had all the ships out there, and that was right on the beach practically. It was just a massacre as far as that's concerned. But we went down then, went through Gaudalcanal town, and then we heard that the outfit on the other side of the mountain were getting too far behind us, and troops were filtering in behind us, and so they said, we're going to switch, we're going to put you over there and bring them over here and see if they can't hold a line. And so they did that, but when they took it over there, we were in a bunch of cane fields, and they took my rifle away from me and gave me a 12 gauge Winchester pump. And I already had a 16 gauge Winchester pump at home. It's with buckshot. And they told me that morning that we had to protect the tank. So I took one of the, I was a sergeant by then. I took one squad of men and put them on both sides of the tank, and there's always a telephone at the right rear of the tank that you have communications with the guy inside. So we took off with that tank. We moved slow. I had to slow them down one time, but we cut a pretty good path down through there that day. And by the time we had all them Japs ahead of us and them guys that replaced us down on the beach, we ran them Japs right through them. They got a medium tank. They told us to be careful that the Japs had one of our medium tanks. I never did hear the end of that or seen that. That was about the end of that. We were going to Tinian. And Tinian was probably the most perfect operation we had.
How's that?
We just went from, they moved us from right down there at the end of Saipan facing Tinian. There was a pretty good channel through there. The Japs had guns on railroad tracks that come out of the side of that mountain that they couldn't get them. So they wound up one of the newest destroyers said full speed down through there, that'll pull them guns out. And that's when the planes got them, when that destroyer made it through there.
So that battle didn't last very long, did it?
No, it didn't last very long, but getting ashore, it was all fortified. But what they did this time, they took a couple of troop ships up to the northern end of that island, disembarked them, and started circling out there like they were going to land. And see, these islands were fortified all the way around, but they don't have enough people to so the Japs was sure that's where the landing was going to be. As soon as they figured the Japs were up there, the planes made sure they didn't get back. And we just absolutely walked ashore on the south end.
My goodness.
On south end we had one, I guess we were there about 3 days. We had about 100-foot cliff to climb. Got up on top of that cliff, and there for 2 or 3 more days we were getting civilians. And that one night you'd hear a baby crying. I mean, that kid cried for 3 hours. It was on Gaudalcanal. I never would have done anything about it, but because that would have just been a trap to get you out there. But long about 1 o'clock, it was pretty moonlight. I moved over to where the noise was coming from, and there was a PFC cannon. I said, "Don't shoot me when I come back." I said, "I'm going to go out and try to get that kid." And I did. I got through the barbed wire, and there was a little girl standing there by the barbed wire. And I lifted her up, and I noticed she had a puncture in her lung. There was big bubbles coming up every time she breathed. And I didn't know, I know the family would be out there, so I hollered, "I'll take her to a doctor." And at least I got back, nobody shot me. The next morning, came through that wire, a man and a woman and a little boy, I figured were their parents. And he stood there for a while and see what was going to happen. And he finally handed me a grenade he had in his pocket.
So he didn't use it on you?
No, he wanted to make sure he was safe. But there was a lot of civilians on that island.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be a pretty good island, because that's where our planes took off to bomb Japan finally. They took us back to Saipan, about 2 days later, they said everybody that left the States with the battalion, you're going home, or you can have another rate if you want to stay. They didn't get any takers on that.
You all decided to go home.
Oh yeah, we all decided to go home. And on the way home, I was talking to one guy in headquarters. See, the whole regiment got a chance to go home, but I asked him how many was left in our battalion. He said there was 105. We had over 1,100 when we left the States, and there was 105 when we went home. And a lot of them were just wounded and malaria. But that was the end of it. At the end of the war, I went in. After I came home on furlough and got married and went back, they made instructors out of us. I could teach the BAR and map reading and demolitions. And when the war ended, yeah, it was less than a year after I got home that the war ended, and so they strapped the MP badges on us, said we're planning on a lot of riots in San Francisco, but that never occurred. And I guess got out of there within 2 weeks after the war was over.